The magazine has been closed and locked as well. We have done this for the protection of the citizens of Londonderry. I am Spike, a boy of this fine city of Londonderry, and I am an apprentice here learning my trade as a cooper. The day is the 7th of December 1688, and the town is in a state of confusion. King James II has been on the throne of England since 1685, and it has been a pretty scary time for Protestants ever since. Now, James appointed Richard Talbot as his agent in Ireland. He calls himself the Earl of Tyrconnell. And ever since he started giving the orders, he's been getting rid of Protestant officers from the army and replacing them with Catholic ones. Tyrconnell has appointed a man to represent him in these parts, and he is called the Earl of Antrim. And he was last seen yesterday with his regiment of Redshanks at the new town of Williamite, which lies about 12 miles from here to the northeast. Now, we had heard that he was being sent to the city to replace Mountjoy when a letter came to the city. We did not know who it was from. It was anonymous. But it was found in Comber in County Down, and it said that on the 9th of December, every man, woman, and child in the city would be slain. What are we expected to think? King James's man, Tyrconnell, replaces Mountjoy for no good reason, sending him to Dublin, leaving the city completely defenceless for a Catholic regiment to come and take over. It all sounds a bit suspicious to me, and the fact that King James, was sending a new Catholic garrison to the city provided no comfort for me and my friends, I can tell you that. The talk of the town from the elders is of the rebellion of 1641, when forces moved throughout the land, slaughtering the Protestants of Ireland. And that has really started to put us all in fear of our lives, and especially now, with Antrim's men so close as today, they have crossed the Foyle by the ferry. Look, there are men in this city, and boys like me, but we would be no match for a trained force of soldiers. They would come in and take over in no time at all, and then what? Then what? Do we wait quietly in our homes till we put the sword? We have little time left for choices, and the elders of the town have been meeting and trying to decide what to do. They will have few decisions to make if Antrim comes knocking on the meeting house doors with his regiment of men at his back. And the city fathers, they are probably meeting right now, for all I know, arguing whether we have a right to save ourselves by shutting the gates against Antrim and his men. Bishop Hopkins says that we must acknowledge James as our rightful king. But is our rightful king a man that would send a regiment amongst us to slaughter us? Me? Well, me, I may be young and only a boy in most people's eyes, but me? I'm all for action. I'm all for action. And that is why I and 12 other of my apprentice friends, having been tired of listening to the argument being made for and against the shutting of the city, have taken it into our own hands and decided to close the gates and seat ourselves from the slaughter which would have walked so easily into our midst. We have seen all the munitions in the magazine and pulled up the bridge, as well as having closing and locking the four gates at Bishop Street and Butcher Street, at both the ship quay and the ferry quay. If we must answer for our actions, then we shall. But we have our families and loved ones who live here, and we must find first of their protection against that which may befall us. The other apprentices are standing watch at the gates. I have been sent to find Captain Ash and report our actions to him. I see Captain Ash, I see him. Come with me to Captain Ash, and I'm sure he will be able to.
The apprentices are right to do what they have done, and in doing so they have settled the resolve and spirit of all citizens, men and women, young and old, to resist the onslaught of James's men. This siege has far-reaching implications. King James II, who ascended the throne upon the death of his brother Charles II in 1685, was continuously at loggerheads with Parliament, as he instituted Catholics into as many high-ranking military and administrative positions in the government. Parliament eventually grew tired of James's meddling, until at last, in 1688, James had to flee to France, as Parliament invited William, the Dutch Prince of Orange, to become the new King of England and reign with James's daughter Mary as joint sovereigns. James, aided by Louis XIV, King of France, sought to raise a Catholic army to siege back the throne from William and Mary. It was that army that marched on Londonderry in late 1688. If the city had surrendered, then that would have cleared the way for James to move his troops into Scotland and down through England, an act which would have provoked another bloody civil war. But the defenders of Londonderry stood firm. No surrender. It is now June 1689, some 6 months after our initial defiance. King James himself has appeared outside the city gates, just below Bishopsgate here on April the 18th. His approach was seen as an act of provocation. He was fired upon by our guards. Many on the Jacobite side thought that this appearance by James would be all that would be required for our capitulation. But they were wrong, and James went back to Dublin, and the siege proper began. The first thing that we had to do was clear away all branches and trees from outside the walls to allow our enemies no place to conceal themselves close to us. Cannon are deployed facing all 4 gates internally, in case any war party from the Jacobites might break through. The rest of the cannon are mounted on the city's walls, with 2 mounted above St Columb's Cathedral here. In those early days of the siege, we strengthened our defences as best we could, but we were still very exposed. Any attempt on us to break out would have been repelled by the 20,000 strong force of James's army. The situation within this city has become frightening and uncomfortable, and in the last few days our peril has increased dramatically as our enemy have built a boom across the river, cutting off our one main supply line, the river. We have sent men out under the cover of darkness to have a look at this barricade, and they've reported back that it is made up of sunken barges below the waterline and fallen trees, and it's quite substantial, so that any attempt on us to break through would put us in great peril, as James's army have set cannon on the shore. Only a few days ago, a small fleet of ships arrived in Loch Foy with supplies, but paused at the mouth of the river, unable to sail up the river en masse because of the danger that they would be entering into. This is not to say that they did not try. One of the fleet's warship, Greyhound, made an approach towards the city, but ran aground and came under fire from Culmore Fort. The barrage of cannon fire it came under was terrible to watch, and many here cried out for her survival as they watched this terrible exchange happen from the walls. Everyone within the city knows that our food stocks are running low, and that the main threat we face now is from starvation and disease. Cannon fire and attempted raids on this city are of a secondary concern to us now. As Greyhound returned to the main body of the fleet, the frustration and abandonment that we felt was manifest on the face of every single citizen within these walls. The fleet itself is based at Inchilland and Loch Swilly. We've been in constant communication with them, but there seems no way for them to break through. We are all waiting and praying that deliverance will come, and we put our faith in the Lord. Come, we must meet with the Reverend Walker and get his counsel in this matter. He's within at the cathedral. Follow me! Child.
I'm sorry, Captain Ash. I did not hear you approach.
What is your name, child?
I'm Elizabeth Cunningham, sir. I'm just the poor girl of the city.
Why are you here?
This is where my father and brother have been buried. My mother died long before these terrible days had befallen us.
Are you able to tell these people here your story?
Yes, sir. I think I'm able.
Good. For it is right that they should know the suffering of the people of this place. When you've told them, deliver them to Reverend Walker within.
Yes, sir. I have not been a citizen of Londonderry for long. My father, brother and I lived some 8 miles outside the city, where we had a small farm which sustained us. When we heard that James had an army that was marching towards the city, and attacking all the Protestant settlements and settlers. My father said we would be safer in the city than where we were, and so we decided to bring what we could and get behind the city walls for protection. It was a refuge that many others took as well, as before the siege started, there were only 2,000 souls living within the city, but that number has grown to nearly 30,000. The city is bursting at the seams. When we enter the city, my brother, a boy of only 13 years of age, and my father were sworn into the garrison, as all able-bodied men who entered the city were. Of the 30,000 based in the city, about 7,500 of those formed 8 regiments of the new city garrison. My brother's garrison was in charge of protecting a small windmill some 300 yards outside the city to the south. James's army made many attempts to take it, but it was well protected. One night though, James's army sent a large number of troops to attack the windmill under the cover of darkness. Some of the defenders managed to force their way out and retreat to the city when it was clear they were going to be overrun. I stood on the wall all night, hoping I would see my brother come running out of the darkness towards Bishopgate in safety. He did not come. The next day, Governor Baker commanded the garrison to attack and retake the windmill, which was achieved in little time. When they returned, they brought my brother's body with them. As we were washing the body and preparing it for burial, a mortar exploded against the building next to us, raining down stone and debris. My father's leg was broken, and he lay in great agony until some men came and lifted the stone from his leg where he had been trapped. We buried my brother, and I then had the work of tending to my father and nursing his wounds. A few days later, one of James' generals, General Rosen, decided to round up all the Protestants he could find in the neighbouring districts and force them under the threat of death to besiege the city. His plan was to force more people in the city and stretch our resources even further. This barbarous act went against every decent and human nature, and the city's council decided to meet fire with fire and threatened to hang some of James' prisoners if he did not release his policy, which he did, reluctantly. This policy worked against him, as it allowed the city's council to keep some of the able-bodied men and replace them with some of the weak and injured. My father was offered the opportunity to go, but refused, saying that he would not leave the city that his son had fought and died for. And so we remained. Some of the people have begun eating rats and the carcasses of dead animals, even tallow and starch to stave off the hunger. Without any proper food or any kind of medicine, my father's condition grew worse, and his leg became infected. He died 2 days ago and has been buried here with my brother. Now I must make my way in this place alone. But my story is not that different to many put under the constraints of this terrible siege. But I am resolved that we shall see this through, and that we must look to each other for strength and comfort and the determination to see this through. I'm sorry. I've kept you so long and
walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. My daughter, art with me. My rod and my staff comfort me. When preparest the table before me, in the presence of my enemies, I notice my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We have been surrounded in this city for 105 days. We ask, when will this end? When will the suffering of the beleaguered population of this city be lifted? We look down from our walls at the massed forces of our enemy, set across the landscape in their order and their regiments, looking upon the city of Londonderry with avarice and malevolence. They have set themselves upon a path to destroy us by one contrivance or another. Well, they have not the method to storm our gates and lay waste to us, although they have tried to do so. We have repelled every attack, and at times taken the fight to the enemy. They have resorted to driving men, women, and children to the gates of our city, to stretch our resources to the limit, knowing full well we will not allow those who come here seeking shelter from this Jacobite storm to be allowed to suffer and to perish at our very door. They have rained bombs upon us, destroying the buildings of our city and sentencing innocents to cruel and terrible deaths, some taken from us immediately by these random executioners, carried off in the echo of their explosions, whilst in the same action condemning others to a slow and lingering demise from their wounds and infection. They've placed a boom across the river, cutting off our one main supply for food and provisions, leaving us to starve whilst they await our demise. They have even sought to remove from us our supply of water, which we could not collect without extreme danger to members of our garrison. And have they succeeded in their plot? No, my friends, they have not. We are steadfast and have remained, sure in the knowledge that we shall receive salvation from our trials. We alone have had the faith that we can maintain. Even when those who have been sent with a duty to save us have waited and tarried for so long, fearing the cannon of the enemy, whilst we have suffered night and day under their bombardment. Even when those who have been charged with protection of this city by the King and Parliament in England have failed us so readily, caring so little for our plight, one which they will ultimately share with us in time, if ever this city falls to the hands of James and his forces. We are supported in our hour of need, and must we suffer in vain? We have been surrounded in this poor city for 105 days, and we ask, how will this end? Shall we all perish at the hands of our foes, as our weakness grows through starvation and disease? Or will the enemy launch an attack of such overwhelming numbers that we cannot repel it? One thing I believe for certain, and that is that we shall defend this city to the last. These days have cost us dearly, and we shall not readily submit because of the price that we, our families, and our fellow citizens have paid thus far. Our cause and duty in the protection of this city is a just and divine one. And so we shall defend it to the last man and the last ounce of strength in him. For if we are not to receive our salvation here, then surely it awaits us in the eternal life to come, into which so many of our families and fellow citizens have already passed. For those of you who suffer in doubt, for those of you who suffer in fear, for those of you who suffer in despair, do not be downcast. Lift your face to the light of the Lord, and know that he is with you, even unto the last. This we shall maintain. Amen.
The next day, God's prayer. I am the wife of my Lord, the captain of the Mount Joy. A merchant craft sailed from the city to get to fly on the Siege of Derry. On returning, we found that James' army had built a boom across the river. I remember the day that I saw the Mount Joy back on the Foy, and the disappointment I felt as I saw it head back into the open loch. When I found out there were communications being sent between the fleet and the city, I ventured out one evening and met with the man who was transporting letters and begged him to take a letter with him from my home, who was meeting with the bulk of the English fleet at Inch Island at Loch Swilly. The boy returned with a letter from Michael stating that he and his crew, who were all men of this city and had families here, were going to chance run the boom and ram it, but were ordered expressly not to by Major General Kirk, the man in command of the fleet and the man sent to relieve this city. Michael said that Kirk made what was a little better than the excuse in saying that the tide and the wind were never favourable enough to chance a run at the boom. And then I had no further communications with him for some weeks. Until yesterday, the 28th of July, at around 7 o'clock, the lookout at the walls cried out that there were ships back on the Foy. I ran to the walls to see Dartmouth, a frigate from Kirk's fleet, engaging on Jacobean guns, and were shooting 2 other ships that had slipped back into the river. The feelings of hope and relief. At last, something is being done to save us. Cause those, even in the weakest state, to cry out in thanks and recover of the little themselves to watch the situation unfold. But my feelings of hope turned to one of dread. Is that when I saw that along with the Phoenix was Michael's ship, the Mount Joy. For the Mount Joy was in the lead and was sailing hard towards the boom, breaking it. But in doing so, rebounded and got stuck in the shallows. I remember seeing soldiers from James's army leaving their positions to attack the men on the Mount Joy, firing their guns and their cannons. And the fear I felt as I watched Michael standing on the bridge of his ship, urging his men to fight. It was awful. The next moment, everything disappeared into a puff of smoke as the Mount Joy fired her cannon. But as the smoke cleared, it was obvious that the Mount Joy had been dislodged from the bank by the recoil of her cannon and was sailing towards the city once again. By this time, the Phoenix reached us, and a few moments later, the Mount Joy landed, and the siege was finally he died in my arms. He gave his life for the salvation of this city. And he died a hero's death.
Although James's army remained camped outside the city and bombarded it for a further 3 days, we were relieved and the siege was over. The Williamite forces had a great advantage, and after the 3 days of bombardment, James's army decamped and marched south. William visited the city and presented Jane Brownie with a necklace in recognition and gratitude for the sacrifices made by her husband. In the following July of 1690, James made his final stand in Ireland as the boy. Once again, the Jacobites were soundly defeated, and William dispelled any dwindling possibility of James returning to the English throne, where William and Mary now ruled as joint monarchs.